Good evening and welcome to another exciting show. And tonight's guest is Nathan Allenby. And good evening, Nathan. Why do I call you Alan? Oh, yeah, that's your surname, Allenby. Now, you're probably wondering, those of you at home, why is this stupid idiot got one headphone off of his ear roll and the other headphone on his ear roll? And the reason why is because this is a bit of a long story. I ordered an embarrassing article from eBay. It's don't tell anybody. It's only between Nathan and I. We're not live, are we? It's a bucket hat. Yes, I got to that age. You know the bucket hat?
I can hear the doorbell now.
No, it's my door.
I can hear the doorbell now.
No, that was my phone. And
Um,
what happened, you see, is I got this notice through on my email that my bucket hat will be arriving at between 9:30 and 1:30 today. Didn't arrive. Then I got another message. It'll be arriving between 5 o'clock and 7:30. Nothing. So whether it arrives tonight or not, I don't know. So I might have to dash off to answer the door and then come back. So we'll see how it goes. But so that's the reason I'm sitting here with one. So I thought I'd explain that. And so if you're ding dong, I'll be off. The other thing I was going to say is we've got the exciting results of the poll, and you can still vote on it, and it could change for Prime Minister of Great Britain, who you would like to choose, who wants to be Prime Minister, and it's quite surprising. Yes, it's very surprising. So that's coming up later. So, and things could change. There's a clear leader coming out, but he could be knocked into second place. You don't know. So there we go. So over to you, Nathan. Empowerment.
right. So actually, democratic empowerment, because tonight I want to talk about democracy. And democracy has turned into something of a spectator sport. It's something that you read about or watch on the TV or whatever, but it's not something that we as the public really take part in. Most of us actually don't really understand what democracy really is, or certainly what it could be, what it should be. So here in Britain, democracy changed quite radically with the 1979 general election. So this was the first election in which Britain moved into the American style of campaigning. Previous to that, political parties had canvassed voters through party volunteers. And the parties had trained party members, party volunteers, to engage with the public, to be part of the whole electoral process. And because of that, parties actually trained people to understand what the democratic system was and how they could play a part in it. After that, they stopped. Now, I got involved in politics about 1979. So this is about the time when it all started for me. Now, how can I put this? There was a gradual phase out of volunteer canvassing across a wide range of organisations. So the Conservative Party stopped first. They got a professional advertising agency in, and then the other parties followed afterwards. Charities followed, and then the other political campaigns. Now, I was lucky enough to take part in one or two organisations that still had this program of training volunteers to understand how to take part and how to be effective in participating. One of those organisations was, I don't know if anyone can remember it, CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, which was
CND,
actually
wasn't it? Was it CND?
Great organisation. And so they really included the members in the strategy of the organisation. And the leader of the organization was a really hard-working guy, a Catholic priest, Monsignor Bruce Kent.
I've met
And
him. I know him.
so
Yes, I
he
met
used
him.
to the country and make an effort to meet everyone. And so I was lucky enough to go to one of the meetings, actually a 7 o'clock in the morning breakfast meeting, where he no food, just breakfast time, and he gave the organisation strategy, the issues that they were wrestling with, uh, what they wanted from us, how we could help, how we could be part of making the organisation successful. So there was a real effort at inclusion and getting us to be part of a ladder where, if we had enthusiasm, we could get promotion, earn our way higher in the organisation if we had the motivation and we wanted to make the organisation a success. Now, this is the way the political parties used to work too. That and some parties more than others. The Labour Party, gave people the opportunity to actually submit motions to the party conference, which could become part of party policy. So there was a real participation ethic inside the Labour Party, which of course was part of its history, how the organisation had arisen. Now, why am I talking about all of this? Because people in the truth movement don't seem to really understand how they can impact the political process. In fact, there are very few people left who took part in that training process. Most people are outsiders to the political process. They don't really know how the system works. They don't know how to engage with the machinery. Now, I want to talk about how we can provide that sort of training to members of the, let's call it the dissident community, the dissident movement, right? This isn't the truth movement. This isn't the anti-lockdown movement. This is the collection of people who dissent from the mainstream understanding of what party politics is about and what it should be about. I'm talking about people who want our society to be more democratic, to take account of ordinary people's views, and want to know how to do that. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the ways that you can start to understand what's going on in a deeper way and become more effective. I'm going to try and outline a strategy for how you can be more influential and take part. Now, there's going to be more than I can talk about in just tonight. If I tried to explain everything tonight, you'd have indigestion. What I can do is I can give you quite a good overview. So let's get started. So the truth movement, the dissident community, has not been very successful. Let's be honest about this. We have to be honest and say they haven't really changed the agenda of politics. We haven't been able to get our issues on the agenda. Now, I know that there have been big events which have increased consciousness amongst the general public. That, the lockdown brought a lot of fresh faces into the community. But what it didn't do was bring more effectiveness. We are still outsiders. Our point of view does not influence policy making.
It can't. Yeah, but it can't though, can it? because
Well,
the system has changed so much since 1979.
and it's changing all the time. And it's changing to shut us out. And you know what? That's how it's always been. If we start to make inroads, they keep on changing the rules. And you know what? That shouldn't discourage us. It just means we're actually starting to be successful. What I want to do is I want to give you the tools to understand what you can do and how to be more effective, how we can make a difference. So what this is all about really is making a difference. I want you to be able to have an impact. We've got a lot of things against us, but there are a few things on our side. One of them is we are on the side of truth.
That's right.
Well,
And often it's an advantage to have a disadvantage. It sounds a bit weird, that. But General Schwarzkopf, who was in, I think it was the first Gulf War, he had a very interesting television program where he said you can be vastly outnumbered but have the advantage on the attacking
yeah.
side. And the perfect example was the Americans in Vietnam. The North Vietnamese were completely outnumbered, but they beat the Americans.
Well,
That's,
no,
and we can. I'm not talking about battles. I'm not talking about war, and I'm not talking about aggression or violence on the street. What I'm talking about is if we use this, we can outwit what's in control. But we've got to use this.
so
this,
that's
that.
true. I mean, you could give a lot of examples. For example, Nelson's navy. In his key battles, he was outnumbered by the enemy, and he still won. I don't know if it's an example I really want to quote, but it's an example. So let's just try if we can get to this. Why have we achieved so little? So one of the things is, I don't think we've ever really been clear about our objectives. We haven't really been clear about what we wanted to achieve. So if you don't know what you want to achieve, you're not going to achieve it. So I can't even read my own handwriting here, it's terrible here. We don't have a clear model of how political change can be brought about. This is a really big one. So there are a number of different models of how interest groups in society can influence events and make things happen. We don't really discuss those. There are lots of things that the dissident community talks about. What it doesn't talk about is the way that it can actually impact on the system, force itself to be heard, force people to pay attention, but more than that, actually cause some kind of change in policy, some kind of, not just policy, change in direction in society. Amazing that nobody talks about this. Surprising. We don't really have a very clear idea of the system that we're trying to engage with. We don't really, this is talking about not just the dissident community, I'm talking about most people in politics don't really have a clear idea of how government operates, about how policies are formed, and who are the significant people, the significant interests. So there are people I know who do understand this. They're a relatively small clique of political insiders. So you'd be talking about MPs and say their parliamentary assistants, and a very small group outside that So you're talking about maybe a couple of thousand people in the whole of the country, not a large percentage of the people who belong to political parties. This is something we've actually got to try and put right. If we don't understand the system, if we don't understand about how we can bring about change, all we are is a bunch of people who are standing around complaining to each other. You know, there's no point in just sort of standing there and having this conversation where we complain and say, ain't it awful? What we're about, what we hope we should be about, is making a difference. If we see something that's wrong, we want to change it. So, let's see. I wish I could read my own handwriting. This is terrible.
Don't worry. You should have become a doctor.
I should, yeah.
Did you know a load of doctors protested, but nobody could read the placards, so they didn't know what they were protesting about?
Yeah. So, do you know, this read so much better in the daylight. Let's just turn them. Oh.
Don't worry. But by the way, did you want your captions in the back yet? Because I've got some captions here to add.
Go on. Put my first caption up then.
Okay, here we go. Here we go, boys and girls. How's that?
Aha, that's the first one. Now go on to number 2. So, democratic engagement, making a difference. That's what this is about, making a difference. How you can participate in democracy. The dissident movement, why have we achieved so little? And
take me song now.
One of the things, there's several things that we don't understand. I've just been through about 3 of them. One of them is we don't actually understand what's holding us back, right? And there are several, how can we call it, misconceptions, problems in the way we understand things that are actually holding us back. So one of the things is we seem to spend a lot of time preoccupied with things that are perhaps not true or are at best irrelevant. So we see people, say, for example, arguing about whether or not the earth is flat. We see people arguing about common law. We see people, for example, trying to get the police to arrest the government, which, of course, you know, is a misunderstanding of how police and government work. It's never going to happen. And
yeah, but also I think that the social engineers have done a genius job of getting everybody depressed, because an army has never been able to fight if they're depressed. They've lost before they even started.
That is another interesting point, and I think this is one of the things I was going to mention here is psychological conditioning.
Yeah.
So in fact, this is one of the problems that we really have. We have been conditioned into a sort of pervasive learned helplessness. We've adopted a series of attitudes where we are obsessed with problems and we cannot see solutions. We have to invert the way that we think about our situation. So if we could only use lateral thinking, you know, we could be, I don't know, this isn't warfare, but it's like guerrilla warfare, where we are the hit and run fighters and we just have to find the weaknesses in the other guy's argument. We can trip the guy up and then run away. We don't have to.
Yeah, I can get what you're saying. Sorry, I didn't mean to chime in over you, but the thing is that to me, we need government like an elephant needs a hang glider. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we can't just stop government instantly like a click of our fingers, because it'll just be complete chaos. But it has to be wound down slowly. And I think one of the routes through is to have like our own areas, i.e., counties, that make the decisions, and then sort of, because I think that we have been subdued to look on like a dog is to look on having a master, like a wolf pack, and like we're like pack
Yes, I
animals.
would agree
Oh,
with
we
you.
need the leader. We don't need a leader. If you want a leader, just look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and
So,
see the leader staring back at you.
So, in fact, this is one of the points that I mean, I'll come on to this a bit later. This is all part of psychological conditioning. So, we have been habituated into a form of mental slavery.
Yeah.
And but at the minute, the biggest problem, one of the reasons why we don't make any progress, is we keep on going round in circles like a dog chasing its own tail with things that aren't really relevant, instead of trying to understand the things that really could make a difference. And one of the problems we have is actual saturation media. That all the time, there are all these distractions that mean we can't actually follow a train of thought. We lose our focus, we get distracted. You know, there are so many things that the dissident community has become obsessed with, which are actually really quite unhelpful, and make us lose our own momentum.
But the thing
Um,
is, Nathan, it's a different breed what we've got now to what was in 1979. Because in 1979, we didn't have internet, we didn't have mobile phones, we didn't even have computers. And Alice Gorgeous said, "You can't beat criminals with focused lobby groups. Please kindly stop this nonsense." Well, it's not nonsense. I think that we need to organise ourselves to be self-supporting in our own communities and just literally ignore government out of existence.
yeah,
That's my
I'd
personal
like
view.
to ask him to be a bit patient, and as we get further on,
Okay,
I'm
righto,
actually going to
righto.
start to explain the paradigm of how we actually
I
produce
understand.
social change. So
Okay, and
give us a chance.
I
I'm really
understand.
glad that you want to hear more. To my to the comments coming back, be patient. This is unfolding. We're going to get to the root of the matter quite quickly.
Righto. Please, yeah, as I say, our people in chat are very polite, and I hope I'm not. I think most of us. I wouldn't like to say that I'm an anarchist, but well, I suppose I am in a way. But I just don't believe in government. Serious, full stop. I just don't believe in
This is the thing with most independent thinkers.
them.
I mean, this is what we are. We're a community. The dissidents are a community of people who think for themselves. And we don't like people to organize us in the oppressive way that we have now. Um, so, one of the things that the dissident community probably doesn't appreciate is that we don't actually represent a political opposition. Could we go on to the next slide, please? So,
Right.
there's just
Okay. Hang on. Next slide. Here we go. The next slide. Here we go. D. Ta-da! Yeah. It's good, that, isn't
so
it? Did you enjoy that?
yeah, it's great. Yeah, we don't yet actually represent political opposition. So we don't actually know how to make an impact where we would they'd have to take notice, where they would have to acknowledge our point of view. So what do you have to be to actually count as some sort of significant force, to be potentially political opposition? And there are a number of things that the dissident community hasn't actually given its attention to. So we talk about things that are wrong, we talk about problems, we talk about things that we would like to be different. We don't actually talk very much about what we would like. So what we don't present, for example, is an alternative political vision. So what we really need, if we are to be some sort of political opposition, perhaps you don't, but I'm going to suggest that engagement, democratic engagement, would require this. We would actually have to have a couple of things. We would have to have a vision. A vision is, if you like, where we would like to get to, the sort of society that we would want, how we would like things to be. And we then need a plan, which is how we would want to get there. So what you see very often is, for example, I've seen this. I've seen collections of essays about what's wrong with, say, globalization, and everyone agrees what's wrong. Everyone agrees what we should have instead. Nobody can work out how we change the system that we've got because it's too entrenched. So yes, it's easy enough to agree on a vision where you'd like to go, although I must say the dissident community has not discussed this. On the whole, I do not hear very many people presenting an alternative political vision. I do not hear people talking at all about a plan of engagement. I'm going to offer one tonight. I'm going to talk about models of how social change came about in the past. And there's one model in particular which I think is relevant to us today.
Before we go on to that, mate, sorry, that was very rude of me. Please accept my apology. But our sound man has said that you're a little bit loud. I've adjusted the volume a little bit on sounds. Don't worry, I've just done it from here. If Nathan's volume's okay in chat, if you could please say, I'd be most grateful. Thank you very much. And I'll quickly use this excuse. Do you believe in any authority figures, Chris? No. Right. There. Over to you, Nathan.
So one of the things we haven't really identified is we're not very good at giving the thing that we stand against a name. We're not very good, and well, it's come a lot clearer since the lockdown, of course, but we're not very good at talking conceptually about what it is that we're opposed to and what's wrong. Right? Mm-hmm. So what I'm talking about is clarity of ideas. So when I talked earlier about why we haven't achieved much, I've talked about the fact that we haven't had clear objectives. We don't know exactly what we're engaging with or how we're going to engage with it. We don't have a clear idea of where we'd like to go to, and we don't have a clear idea of how we're going to get there. Now, these are quite fundamental things. As a community, we need to spend more time talking about that. And not in just an abstract way, but in a practical way to focus our immediate activities. Because I do believe, and I'm going to explain, that I think we can have an impact. Now, I think it's actually very helpful for us to engage with, how can I put it, authority, with the people that we disagree with all the time. Even when it's not going to succeed. Every time we engage, it's like practice, where we learn more about the system. I've been through this process myself. I've been a political activist for something like 38 years. And during that time, I've had some successes, but a lot more failures. But every time I didn't succeed, I learned something. Every time I tried to engage with the system, I met people who explained their experiences, and I learned something from them. It's really important that we don't give up and that we continue to try to engage. But every time we gather experience from our attempts at engagement, we should try to fit together a big picture of how the whole system works and what sort of part we can play in it. Because we can make a difference. Each of us can make a difference. But we're trying to build a national and an international community of dissidents. We might have our own little local communities. The aim that I hope you will get by the end of this is that we've actually got to connect together in a way that we can act collaboratively so that we have a larger impact than just ourselves individually, our little local group, that we can act as a community nationally or together across Europe. So some of us will remember, for example, that just before the COVID lockdown, the yellow vests had spread to something like 19 different European countries. And this movement was starting to be a real headache for the authorities. They couldn't shut it down, no matter what they did. And the one thing that shut them down was the lockdown. There's a picture of Paris, Champs-Élysées, the week before the lockdown and the week after. And the week before the lockdown, the whole street, for whatever distance you could see, like a mile and a half, was totally crammed with protesters. And the week after, it was totally empty. Now, yes, it's possible for us to really make a difference. 6 years ago, Europe was at ignition point. And I'm sure that's the reason why they brought in the lockdown. We shouldn't be discouraged. We should realize we very nearly made it happen. There are lessons to learn.
Right. But
Right.
The Yellow Vests did get infiltrated, though, didn't they? Because they didn't have a leader. You see, they were successful because they didn't have a leader.
Yes. So one of the issues that we have to realize is that it is possible to organize a leaderless movement. And that's actually a good thing to try and do for a lot of democratic reasons. The problem with all of this is a leaderless movement actually requires a great deal more leadership, not less.
Yes,
because it requires everyone in the movement to know how to play their part. It requires everyone in the movement to potentially be a leader when it's called upon. They've got to
hang on, self-discipline, though, isn't it? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you in, but self-discipline, that's what it really is.
I'm very glad when you cut in, and you've a very appropriate comment. It's like, for example, in World War One, the German army used to train all of its soldiers to perform the function of the rank above. So, say, for example, if an officer got killed, well, then the sergeant could do his job. And if the sergeant got killed, well, the corporal could take his place, and so on. And, this is the thing. We mustn't rely upon other people. The trouble with this movement is that, and in general with the public, is part of our psychological conditioning is that we're always looking for leaders, right? We have confidence in ourselves and our own instincts. But one of the things we can do is we can give people training. We can actually cultivate people and give them confidence so that when the moment comes, when they have to step up, well, they'll feel comfortable to do it. So in a minute, I'm going to talk about, an idea for how we can organize training in our own groups.
And also, if you'd like to call in on the second hour and speak to Nathan, there's a link to the studio on the advert on my Facebook and Telegram channels and Gab channel. So, and also X and what's the other one? WhatsApp as well. So if you'd like to speak to Nathan in the second hour, there's a link to the studio, and I'm sure he will welcome you to come on and speak to him. And we're going to be joined by another guest in the second hour as well. So there we go. I won't say that it's Paul English because that would be giving the game away if I told you. Oh shit, it is. Sorry.
Shall we go on to our next slide?
Righto, the next slide, here it comes. Voila.
So, I know a lot of people at the minute are quite obsessed with supporting political parties. And as you know, there are these new political parties coming up. There's Reform, and then there's a new one, which is, what's it called? I forget. Anyway, but the point is that there are these new political parties coming up, and people think that the answer is to support political party. And there are lots of understandable reasons why they say that. Only people in Parliament, only Parliament can pass new laws. If you want a law repealed or if you want a new law introduced, you've got to do it in Parliament, which means you've got to have MPs or whatever they say. Now, I'm going to try and explain an idea about how the political system works and say that maybe that's not the way to go about it. So,
but isn't again? I'm sorry to interrupt again, but to me,
go for it.
Trying to change the system, to me, the government is mafia. Okay, they're worse than the mafia because at least you know the mafia are crooked, but the government are even more crooked. So I think trying to change government by joining them is more like thinking that you can convert the entire mafia into Jehovah's Witnesses overnight. It won't happen because it's too corrupt. So I don't believe in the system.
I'm not going to argue with you there. I'm actually not. I'm going to argue that we're better off staying outside the system.
We are. I agree with you.
And I'm going to talk about how that's politically credible. So I could go back and let's start introducing how the process of political change happened in Britain. That's actually the next section, but maybe I could talk about it now. Well, let's start talking about what a movement is as opposed to a political party. I'll stay with the script. So if you can imagine, political parties are like mercenaries. They have to go and they find people to sponsor them. So political parties chase various different groups of voters. Political parties chase various types of sponsors who will give them money. So corporate lobbyists. You've got corporations who give money to political parties that promote the right sort of policies. I believe that fundamentally all political parties today are for sale because political parties.
Pfizer. Oh, sorry. Terrible cough.
Since parties move from having volunteers as canvassers, they require to obtain huge amounts of donations for professional advertising agencies. The only way they can get those donations is effectively by selling policies. They have to find people who are willing to give them money, and they have to give them something in return. They give them policies for donations. That's just how it works. But on the other hand, if you have a movement that supports, say, a particular type of policy, and that movement has X million voters, you can say, we're not supporting your party. unless you offer these policies. If you want our voters, you've got to give them something to vote for. And this is the way forward. This is the way it worked in the past. So if you can imagine all of the different types of constituencies, I'll call them constituencies, interests, whatever, that are trying to get political parties to curry favour with them. Like say, for example, so-called communities like the Jewish community or the Islamic community or various other types of groups, corporate interests, various billionaires who offer large donations to parties. But you also have movements that have a voter base and they can bring millions of votes. And so you're effectively in a bidding war against all of these other different interests. And ultimately, I think we're not really interested in Parliament. But I know a lot of people at the minute are trying to, they see that they're obsessed with Parliament and they think that this is the way forward. I'm not sure it is. Now, I'm going to talk about different types of movement. Now, there are several different types of movement, but I'll mention just two. So there's a movement of ideas. A movement of ideas is where you have intellectuals who advocate a sort of coherent set of policies. They, for example, identify problems. And then you have social movements which are concerned with concrete action, practical action. So these are two contrasting types of movement. Not the only types of movement, but they're important ones. The movement of ideas and social movements. So I can't think of any good examples in Britain, but I can think of a good example from India. So there are people who talk about the problems in Indian society. One of them you might have heard of is Arundhati Roy. So she's an author, people have read her books. But she's talked, for example, about the construction of dams and how they tend to displace small, poor farmers who get their land flooded, and they make other large farmers incredibly rich because they suddenly buy up the land that's got irrigation that's produced by the dam. So she says that dams produce a concentration of wealth and they're to disadvantage of the majority of the population. They don't actually increase food production. There's another guy, Colin Todhunter. Again, similar kind of narrative. He talks about how global corporations and agribusiness have started dominating agriculture and how the government's selling them out. Very good author. I like both of these authors. They're really good. They give a clear account of what's wrong and why it's gone wrong. Now, by contrast, there's a different lady called Vandana Shiva. Now, she's a really interesting character. She used to be a nuclear physicist, and then she realized that nuclear physics and nuclear power weren't helping the world, and what people really needed was traditional agriculture and traditional societies. And she's gone to do something to help them. So in addition to, articulating the same points as the two authors I've just mentioned, she goes out and she organizes farmers' cooperatives, seed sharing schemes. She's got a various set of different projects, an educational project, a research farm, which looks into new types of, this isn't a contradiction, new ways of using traditional agriculture. And she's involved in a series of practical projects which help ordinary people. Now, the great thing about social movements, as opposed to movements of ideas, is they help people in a direct, practical way. And that gives them sustainability. People will support these movements because they get something back from them. Now, at the minute, I'm sorry, a lot of people in the dissident community won't ever have thought in these terms, but let's think about real problems in our society that are caused by the enemy that we don't often name. So the enemy that we don't often name is globalization. Well, that sounds a bit abstract, isn't it? But if we called it the World Economic Forum, we'd start to get a bit closer. But it's a set of social trends that come together. And so what we get is we get people who have social isolation. They never talk to anyone. We have the absence of community. We have people who are afraid of crime because of, I won't mention it, but the problems that globalization has brought in changing our communities. We have problems like precarious employment, people who have problems with money and debt because of predatory lending. Now, these are issues that a social movement would begin to address. These are issues that I would suggest our local groups ought to start becoming aware of. So instead of talking about things that are abstract, like is the earth flat, maybe we could talk about people who live near us who've got real problems. So say, for example, somebody who's lost their job and got into debt and is in danger of losing their house. How do you help them? Because this is something I have done myself as a political activist. I have tried to familiarize myself with these organizations and help people directly that need it. It's all very well talking about, high grand ideas and geopolitics.
I agree with you.
What about people near you? Now, there are things that we can do. So loneliness and isolation. That is one of the things that modern media, even worse than the television, that's a problem that it's generating. People are looking at their social media instead of talking to their neighbours. Actually making us.
I agree there. But the thing is, Barefoot Foreigner has a question. Coming in here, she says, "Question: Are you wanting to be part of a political alternative?"
Yes, that is broadly what I think all of us want in the dissident community. We want, perhaps we wouldn't, how would we call it, political or democratic or changing society? There's a process of engagement and a process of change that some people might not call political, and yet it really is political in a meaningful sense.
But there's little things. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you there. But
you go right ahead.
Thank you. But no, because you're the guest. But what I was going to say is that there's something that maybe a little choked. The other Nathan. Lucius, yes, Nathan Lucius. He gave Christmas cards out to complete strangers. He bought some cheap Christmas cards and just gave them out at Christmas time to strangers. And Anorak, who comes to the show, he sometimes, if he's in a supermarket and somebody lets him go before them, he will actually give £1 or some money to the checkout lady and say, "Knock that off that person's bill." There's little tiny things we can do that can brighten a person's day, even a smile. And I think that this is what is needed, a kindness. And another one was there weren't a charity or anything like that. People, their own will, I noticed this in the City of London, were feeding the homeless. And they were smiling and helping them. And had set up soup kitchens in the City of London. I saw that many years ago when I worked in London. So there's a lot of kind people out there. I think we need to tap into that kindness. I really do. We hear the negative.
And by the way, it's actually very rewarding too. If you talk to these people, the people who are unfortunate, life hasn't gone their way. They have quite interesting stories, all of them. If you actually talk to them and find out what happened to them, you'll
That's right.
understand a lot, learn a lot about our society. I think so. I'm going to go back a little bit, and I'm going to explain my model of social change and how I think it happens. So let's go back to the 19th century, and I hope people will forgive me in case I've said this before. So what happened was between about 1780 and 1820, there was a series of legislation called the Enclosures Acts, and these drove ordinary people off the land and made them effectively homeless. They had to go and work in mines and factories. This is the Industrial Revolution. It's also the Mercantile Revolution. It's when people had their lives transformed and were thrown from being self-supporting into a wage economy. And people were impoverished. They had a dreadful situation. Their lives were precarious. The majority of the country's population was thrown into misery. And they had no say about it because less than 1% of the population could vote in elections. So there was a movement for mass democracy. And that was in the 1830s, and it was called the Chartist movement. And the Chartist movement charter had 5 points. They wanted universal suffrage, well, universal male suffrage at that time, but it's heading in the right direction. They wanted constituencies of equal sizes, because you had some constituencies had half a dozen people and others had 1 million. And then they wanted secret ballots. They wanted MPs to have a salary so that ordinary people could afford to become MPs. And they wanted annual elections. So we can see that's quite a reasonable set of demands. The only one that hasn't been implemented was the annual elections. Because now we can see, if it's 5 years between elections, well, that gives the government a lot of time when they can ignore public opinion. Still a sensible proposal. Anyway, the government of the day completely ignored this. They weren't going to respond to this. Why should they give concessions to anyone? And the Prime Minister at the time, Lord Russell, introduced something called physical force Toryism. So basically, when there was a demonstration in favour of democracy, in favour of giving everyone the vote, they got a load of toughs, gave them a good amount of beer, until they were well and drunk, and sent them in to beat up the demonstrators. And if that didn't work, they sent in the dragoons. And so basically, after a time, it became obvious they were getting nowhere. That movement failed completely. And it proved effectively that you can't just demand democracy. You can't demand democratic representation if you don't have any power in society. Now, something else that happened in parallel to this, separately, there were a series of changes happened. First of all, there were the building societies, which was mutual banking. That started in the 1810s and 20s. So that actually started to develop some wealth, some savings amongst ordinary people, capital. Then, in the 1830s, from 1837 onwards, the co-op movement started to be formed. So ordinary people, started their own businesses. They were no longer dependent upon the rich, and the co-op movement became incredibly important economically. The third element was the trade union movement, and trade unions became legal eventually after years of not being legal but operating anyway, and after a series of really horrible strikes in the 1860s. And with those three elements together, Suddenly, ordinary people became so economically significant that they could no longer be ignored. At that point, ordinary people started to be given the vote. So, as we worked together, as ordinary people worked together and established some sort of economic power through slow, patient building, by building a series of, how can we put it, community initiatives, businesses, gradually they became a force that couldn't be ignored. This is the way that you get political representation. This is the way that you change society. It had a huge impact.
I agree with you there, but what I'd like to say is that we're living in a completely different times. For example, we've all got the best library in the world. It's called the internet. We've got mobile phones. They reckon that if the miners in the 1980s, I think it was it 1983, the miners' strike, if they'd have had mobile phones, sorry, 85, if they'd have had mobile phones, they'd have won. Now the thing is, we've got, but the thing is, the government would have switched the signal off. But the point I'm getting at is that I believe we need to be tough and strong. Now, there's two groups that I'd like to mention that I've got a lot of interest in. I don't join groups. I have nothing to do with them, but it's what I've seen. Okay, there's one group that is Hell's Angels, ex-Hell's Angels, and these blokes are really tough guys. You're talking about, you wouldn't want to meet them down at the dark alley, you know, although you would probably be perfectly safe if you met them down a dark alley, you know, they wouldn't attack you. And what they do, they're like a police. And if a woman feels threatened, she thinks she's going to be attacked or raped, she calls a number and one of their people will be on the scene within a certain amount of time. If a child is worried that there's a paedophile around, again, they call a number and one of their group turn up, and their very presence alone will they'll get back. You know what I mean? And there's also the peace.
That's a great example of the sort of initiative we need to have.
That's right. And then also there's the Peace Force, PEACE, and the police do not represent us anymore. They represent the mafia government. So if, for example, someone's going to be evicted from their house due to not paying council tax or whatever, say an elderly lady or someone like that, if there's, say, 40 or 20 police officers, we double it and send 40 of our peace officers along to politely tell the police to clear off, go away, and tell them the law, because the peace officers know the law, the police don't know the law, and use the law against them. This is what we need. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but let's face it, if you're outnumbered, and of course we take their equipment off of them because it belongs to us as taxpayers, and they can walk back to their station, we'll take their car as well and their vehicles, and goodbye, we don't want you. And they say, what about our vehicles? Well, there's a bus down the bottom, you can catch a bus. What can they do if they're outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1? Be very polite to them and just tell them. I mean, look what happened in France with the yellow vests. I saw it on YouTube and it was taken down. And what happened is the police were beating the protesters with their truncheons, and a group of protesters some yellow vests ran down an alley, and it's a trap. And what happened? There was a pincer movement, and these police could not escape. And they're just surrounded, and you'd never seen, there's about half a dozen of them, terrified. And they said, take your helmets off. They're not going to hurt you. Take your helmets off. And they took their helmets off, and they said, right, we want to know your name and address so that we can sit in a people's court for treason, and you can go after that. And they made a gangway, but they've got to take their helmet, and that to be photographed so they know who they were, because you're going against your treason. That worked. It's terrific. And they were terrified. These police officers, you've never seen them so terrified. You could see it in their face. But it's very intimidating. But not one hair was harmed on their head. They could walk free. Minus their equipment, of course. You know,
Shall we go on the next slide?
certainly. I don't think you're too keen on that idea, are you? Are you, Nathan?
No, I think I am, in fact. I think what you're talking about is, how can we put it? So we've been through the mechanisms of social change. We just talked about that. Constructively building a parallel economy from the bottom up.
And also, we got Paul in the studio. Good evening, Mr. Paul English, our surprise guest.
Well, good evening. Maybe not.
Maybe not. Cooey. Perhaps he's frightened off.
Let's talk about the next slide. So the next slide is actually how we organise and train people.
Righto.
So could we have the next slide, please?
I'll just put it up.
No, one after that.
Oh, the one after that. Oh, by the way, we got a question as well.
Yes,
hang on a
please.
minute. Hang on. So let's do the next slide. Okay. And then we come back. And it says, and Barefoot Foreigner says, does he suggest that the awakening movement become with and involved in? Sorry, what does he suggest that the awakening movement become active with and involved in? How can they support one another? So that's a question from Barefoot Foreigner.
I think that's something that's going to evolve over time. So I believe that we should be doing things that support the development of the cash economy, for example. And I think there's work that we need to do about that. I've tried to talk about that before in terms of keeping cash alive and alternative currencies. I think it's probably a bit much to try and talk about tonight. But at the minute, we're losing local economies, and that's going to have a profound effect upon society. If all that we have left is corporations and chain stores, then effectively they'll be able to impose things like CBDCs upon us. Now, if all the money, all our spending goes through the corporate system, if there's no other system where we can purchase the sort of commodities that we want through real money, then we're absolutely lost.
But there's a solution to that. And the gentleman
Good evening,
in chat has got the solution. I was going to say you've got the solution in hand, but I thought that people might take it the wrong way.
Farmer and independent food from the farm.
Yes, but he's got another solution about the old folding stuff, the dosh. Haven't you, Paul?
Yes, indeed.
Anyway, good evening. Sorry, I didn't respond when you introduced me.
That's okay. That's all right.
Sensibly put myself on mute because I was slurping tea, and I thought you didn't want a tea slurping background soundtrack to the show.
Yes, and also the introduction music didn't start us this evening. Sorry.
Really?
No.
Oh.
Well, it started, but the one that leads in, I don't know why. So we see if it does it on the outro. Oh, well, that's life, isn't it?
It's all part of life's rich tapestry, Eric. I'm sorry about that. The audio, the vexations of audio production, I'll tell you.
Oh, it's a bitch, isn't it? Oh,
it is. But I think that, I mean, the cash thing and everything, and all, they're all, I think they're all good measures. I mean, I don't think there's any one solution or that there's any one thing that is to be done. There's a lot of things to be done. And I think different people are suited to approaching and dealing with different tasks. I'm always reminded that if you see something that needs to be done and no one's doing it, guess what? It's your job. That's how it needs to be. You're the one that saw it. You're the one that it's bugging. You're the one that's got to act on it in whatever way. It's a good starting point. I think, if we say that we're in a movement, it is a political movement. It's not a political party, but as I understand politics, it's a discussion, is it not, to decide upon the ground rules of how we live. And the problem that we have is, and this is Rich coming from me, as you well know, I've never voted for a party in my life. Not that I think that does too much good, but if we don't participate in politics, the other side does and ends up mangling it up. And that's why we've kind of got what we've got, because we have been absent from that process, I think for extremely healthy reasons, to be quite honest. Who wants to hang around with these sorts of creatures that infest it? They're not good for your health. They're bad. But I don't think it's one thing. I think we need to cover all angles. You need to pay attention to politics and you need to act locally. That's my take. I think you've got to take on a lot, or some of us do, and look at every single aspect of the problems that we're facing. I think there are solutions to money. I think there have been solutions to money. In fact, I know there have. The problem is, historically, when you look at these events that have taken place, they have been ended usually due to bombs. Literally a great deal of violence has been applied to nations that suddenly start to see common sense and go, oh, the economy really ought to serve our own people and not the global sort of cosmopolitan stockbrokers.
Can I stop you for a second? So there have been initiatives that have been applied, particularly in terms of banking. So I know a couple of people in the South. One of them was going to start his own local bank. So to start your own bank, you've got to put a £5 million bond with the Bank of England. So that sits with the Bank of England while your bank operates, and you get nothing from it, no interest. But that's your license to start a bank. So he got the 5 million quid, he got all of that set up, and then he just couldn't get enough cooperation to get the scheme off the ground. There was somebody else managed to persuade something like, was it West Sussex or East Sussex Council, to start a county bank. I think it was West Sussex. Anyway, point is, they started a bank, and after about 10 years, they just got no participation. So this was a local bank. It should have encouraged local investment, and somehow it didn't gel because there wasn't the support for it.
And Sean Hamer,
if I could interrupt you a little bit, Nathan, I just want to say that I mean, there's two things going on there. One is the lack of conviction by crowds. I'm fully aware of that. It takes time. But the main problem with those sorts of approaches, from my perspective, is that there's no point building an actual bank under the aegis of the Bank of England. That's the whole problem. In other words, people think about finance, I would suggest, understandably, in an inaccurate way. What we have, pounds, are not money. They're currency. They're fraudulent promissory notes issued by a central bank, which is a private cartel, blah, 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 blah. Many people who've heard us talk about these things know this stuff. But it is the fundamental engineering problem. It's engineered to destroy anything that gets involved with it, including the Bank of West Sussex. It could never do anything much if it wants to actually benefit the people directly, because the Bank of England won't let it. They will say, you're working under our system and we're the boss, and they would be right in that. So
that wasn't the problem, Paul. But anyway, it was just lack of part. So I think part of it is you've actually got to have a scheme of how you're going to make this work, and you've got to have cooperation from the businesses. So the example I would give would be, say, for example, the Mondragon Bank, where you actually had a co-op organisation in the Basque region of Spain.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
They set of co-ops, and they had a bank integral to the organisation. Look, it's the same problem with the currency being fiat money, but they made it work for them. And it's having an organisation, a bank that's on your side, as opposed to a predator.
Can I cut in here? Because Sean Hamer has come up with a fantastic comment.
I'm going to beg your indulgence, because there was one bit I wanted to finish here, and it's about the training program I was going to advocate. So forgive me, I'm slightly over time. I should have got this finished 10 minutes ago. But look, I think we need to have a structured training program for our groups. So if anyone's got a local group, I would suggest that there are things that they need to teach people. They need to teach people sort of an ideology of peaceful, lawful change. They need to teach people the law and how to stay within it. One of the things that we were talking about before is passivity. And there's this whole psychological conditioning where people are afraid to step forward, be visible, take part. We need to teach people the skills of empowerment. So what do I mean by empowerment? I have a set of notes about this. Basically, there are skills about successful strategies that have worked for organizations in the past. There's practical advice for how you confront situations. So say, for example, there are lessons from how successful and unsuccessful movements operated, what their characteristics were, the type of traits that caused organizations that fail, the type of traits that caused organizations to succeed. And, there are various organizational skills that we need within them. People need to learn things like emotional resilience. So say, for example, if somebody's abusive towards you, well, you don't get upset about it. If the media attacks you and calls you bad names, well, that's just, you don't get upset.
Who's got these skills to train? And what I was going to say is that Sean Hamer's come up with some very good points. He said, the truth movement has been subtly groomed to be the false apostates of the incoming New Age scourge. Just look at how many truthers believe the New Age Gnostics. And Robert Dorr, hello, mate. Hello, Robert. Long time no see. And hope you're doing well. He says, seeking a bond from the Bank of England is rather like inviting a man-eating tiger to dinner. I'd agree with you there. And he's gone on to say, Paul is right. The Bank of England are the roadblock to this country's freedom and has been since its inception. And you're spot on there, mate. And the real Prime Minister of Great Britain is the Director of the Bank of England.
Could we see the last slide, please, Eric?
Certainly. Right, hang on. Here we are. The last slide is coming up. Hang on, there's several here. We've got organisational format.
Back one. That's it.
That one?
Yep.
Right, okay.
No, before that.
That one?
Okay, that's it, yes. Organisation and format. So look, these are practical tips that actually I think are really useful. So there are a number of things that cause people to come back to groups. If you set up a local group, what sort of things are going to make somebody come back? Well, the first thing is if people have fun, if they actually enjoy themselves. The next thing is if they feel a connection with other people in the group and they get to know people and feel they've made friends, right? Another thing is if they feel that it's given them personal growth, that they've actually learned skills. And the most important thing is if they feel the group itself is actually achieving something. That is, if they come along, they're actually contributing something that they value and feel is important. These are things that we need to make sure our groups do. Right. Now, in terms of making connections in the group, it's a good idea. One of the suggestions is to create buddy groups inside your group. So say if you've got 12 people or whatever, you divide it up into groups of 2 or 3 people who are buddies and they work together. Now, that makes people feel like they know somebody there. When they come to the meeting, that's somebody that they look for. Now, each of those buddy groups is given a mentor, and that's somebody who's got a bit more experience. And so what we're going to do, for example, is give those buddy groups homework. So say, for example, the group does little exercises. We're going to give the buddy group a little exercise to do. They've got to work it out, and they turn to their mentor for advice how to do it. So the other thing I would say is it's a really good idea if people don't sit down when they come to meetings. we spend too much time sitting down, and it's something that engenders passivity. I think people should spend more time standing up, and not just, this whole business of sitting in rows. We need to stand in circles. So it would be good if we started our meetings with some sort of physical activity like dancing or singing. I was actually going to say starting by dancing something like the hokey cokey. Or there are other things that you can do. There are these warm-up exercises that happen in corporate groups, like clapping exercises. You might laugh at them, you might say how jaded and tired. Do you know what? It gets everyone taking part.
I think it's spot on, Nathan. Absolutely. I worked in a company, right, years ago. Everything you say, I completely agree with. You've got to get people energized. It's about an attitude in a way. We used to start the day, you know those Japanese companies that used to have the company song? Well, this was 1984 right through to 1990. I worked in a place where we were on the telephone, about 200 of us every day, in one room. So it was an absolute cacophony, right? And we were pitching people over the phone. Businesses, mind, they're fair game, finance directors and the like, not preying on vulnerable little old ladies at home. We didn't do any of that crap. And we had to start the morning session and the afternoon session with a company song, which was mad. And you were told to put in as much energy as you could, because you were about to sit down for 3.5 hours and belt it out. And anybody that knows, if you sit down and do a lot of talking, you don't realize how draining it is until the day comes around. You just go, ugh. And this is me in my 20s when I was really fit, but it's absolutely knackering. But it builds a muscle. And the energy alone overcomes your reasonableness. Reasonableness gets in the way. Oh, it can't be done. We can't do this. Let's think it through. No, don't. Pick up the phone. And that's what, just pick up the phone and make a call and act on it. So everything you say, I completely agree with. Yeah, it's absolutely right. People need to move around. I think it's probably why there was so much good country dancing in the past in these islands. It acts as a binding agent because people know they're going to be crap at it, and that's what makes it fun too, and that binds you together. You know, I used to stand next to a guy who couldn't sing one note right, but he sang it with such energy. It was hilarious. It's fantastic, so yeah, I'm all for that.
Exo said it sounds a bit Bolshevik, which reminds me, my grandfather got dragged off by the Bolsheviks, and it certainly made his eyes water.
What sounds Bolshevik? What sounds Bolshevik?
Well, I don't know. That's what he said. So
yeah,
but you don't want to be. You don't want to. Get dragged off by your Bolsheviks, do you?
So there's something about being taken out of your comfort zone. It's really important. And I think this is really, really basic, gentle. You sort of go, oh, is it that important? Yeah, it is. When you're knocked out of your comfort zone, when you get that horrible feeling in your stomach, oh, God, have I got to do that thing, right? It holds people back so much in life in so many areas. And once you get pushed into a thing, go out there and sing. Oh, I can't do that. No, you can't, but go do it. It changes individuals. Individuals get changed almost instantaneously, and suddenly they go, oh, I actually have got some fire inside me. Yes, you've just never put yourself in a position where it could be stoked. Let's do that. And it means feeling uncomfortable, and that's where it all starts. People go, I would just want to be comfy. Well, sorry, I don't think it comes with the territory these days.
Well,
here was something else I was going to suggest. I was going to suggest that the group ought to have training exercises. And I was going to suggest one. You all stand in a circle and you have two people in the middle and you practice things like, I don't know, police encounters. So there was a video where two policewomen rang on a lady's doorbell. One of the policewomen was wearing a police hijab. And it was, we need to come in. We need to take your daughter's phone. She's been sent a text message that's given us concern, or some rubbish like this. And they were quite, anyway, it was a very difficult confrontation. How would you deal with that if the police confronted you? Now, you have rights. We ought to practice rehearsing our rights and standing up to people who want to trample on our rights. So actually going through a training exercise like that and say, get one of the body groups to rehearse this in advance, to rehearse the scenario, and then they perform it for the group, and everyone else chimes in with their comments about how it should be done. And then next week, it's another buddy group's turn. Or you could have a different training exercise. This is one that I personally like. One person stands there and the other one says, "You're a racist," or "You're a fascist." Now, we know what's going on there. It's because certain, shall we say, certain left-wing groups actually like to polarize. They actually feel virtuous by shaming other people, that they dehumanize other people by attaching those labels to them. And the thing is not to say, "Oh no, I'm not a racist. I have a friend who's a black person." It's not to say that. I mean, who cares whether or not you do? The point is, they don't care either. It's about just dodging the whole thing. If somebody makes an accusation like that at you, they're not actually concerned whether or not you really are a racist. They're about projecting their hatred onto you. And you have to turn around and say something to them like, "No, you're just a bully. I'm not a racist. You're politically intolerant."
Well, yeah, but what about another way I do is, I mean, to me, that's like all playground stuff. You know, "You're a sissy, you're a this, you're a that." I agree with them and turn it into a joke. And I think that's something like, they say, "Oh, you're not." Yeah, that's right. I've been practicing goose stepping all morning. Hey, do you know how tall Hitler was and where he lived? He was about that tall and he lived over there, you know, things like that. And just make them laugh. It's best to bring them down with laughter. That's what I've found, because if you meet like with like, it gets more and more and more heavy. I once saw a police officer confronting someone, and this bloke said, "Your hair needs washing."
Yeah, that's a good one.
And it brought it down. Said, "Do you know your hair needs washing?" You know, and it just came back with a response. But I've usually found that time and time again. That now Sixth Blade has come out with a good one. That's Survival, Steve. When natural law is understood by more people, freedom is generated, and the empowering activities will not be necessary, because we won't be getting tyrannized by PDF files and cannibals. Actually, Steve, if you want to come on, free to come on, because there's a link to the studio in the advert for the show. But very interesting. But no, I actually do think we need to fight back with humour. And these people say, "You're this, you're a racist." Oh yeah, you know, and just agree, just agree and turn it into a joke, because these are all childhood kind of playground slurs to bring a person down. And my attitude is, we're adults and we don't do things like that.
So we need to learn how to deal with this. But we also need to rehearse positive things. And what I'm trying to suggest is, in general, we need to practice these skills together in a supportive environment. We need to give each other encouragement so that we feel confidence to face whatever is thrown at us.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, police expect a certain response, but if you give a response they don't expect, it completely floors them. And again, humour does bring them down. It really does. Yeah. I mean, I once, many years ago, I worked in a site office in on the Thames. It was Billingsgate Market on the side of the Thames. Yeah. And I'll be very brief on this. I've said this before, but this was absolute classic moment. It was one of the best projects I ever worked on, because it was, shall we say, seat of your pants design. Because if there's a design they couldn't work out, you actually went on the site, you're on the site, and sketched it out on a sketch pad and gave it to the contractor. That's how it was. That I loved it. Absolutely fantastic. And everybody had their own levels to work on, and you liaise with the sort of next site architect down and the next site architect above you, and it was great. So anyway, one morning we're sitting there, and we were. It was just a laugh because it's all contract blokes, and the security bloke. We used to have a laugh and joke with him. He's a bit of a laugh, and we got a phone call. He said, "Security." He said, "You got a policeman coming to see you. You got to have a surprise." So we were ready. Anyway, we're sitting there, walking up the stairs. We heard these creaky boots, and it's the City of London police. Who is your? Goes up to the secretary and says, "Who is your superior?" And she sort of looked at him, and I can't remember exactly. I think she said, "What, are you a Jehovah's Witness?" Or she said, is God or something? And we're sitting there. Remember, it's all contract blokes, so we're a little bit rebellious. So who is in control here? Well, the senior architect was the image of James Robinson Justice, and if you're a certain age, you'd have seen him in the films in the 1950s and 60s. And he was having a meeting round a corner, and it all went quiet. And he looked round a corner like this, and and this copper is obviously his first day. He said, "Well, there is a lorry blocking Lower Thames Street, causing a hold up. And if you don't get that lorry moved in 5 minutes, I'll have this entire site closed down." And James Robinson Justice, senior architect, said, "You will you? Well, our client is Citibank, and Citibank pay your wages. And I think they will be delighted to hear that you've closed this site down and they've lost money over you." And he went, "Oh," and we all went, "Oh, bet your mummy's proud of you." And as he walked in really tall, and he walked out really small. And we phoned the security bloke up and said, we told him what happened. He said, "Give him a week," as he walks out. And we said, "Oh, I bet your mummy's proud of you." It was all going, "Oh, Cooey, would you like to be escorted to the gate? There's some big, tough workmen round here that might attack you." And we were taking the piss. And this bloke was really brought down by humour. We were laughing and joking. And that's I've never forgotten that. The way it was brought down, as if he could close the entire site down. "I'll have this site closed down if you don't move that lorry." Just, and I think that's it. We got to laugh and do more laugh, because if you would have, like attracts like, these police have this thing like this, and you've got to come back with a response they don't expect, because they're like actors. They're acting a scene, and you're going around. You're attacking them from an angle that they don't expect, and that's how you win wars and win battles. And we're in a war, whether we like it or not. And that's it, really. That's my piece. So I hope you like that, folks.
Yes,
I liked it.
Yes,
Nathan has a slight look of James Robertson Justice, don't you think, Eric?
He does, yes. You
do a bit, Nathan.
Colour.
It's a compliment.
Do you remember that one? What was it? Doctor at something, I can't remember. And he had this patient, and there was he was saying, "Well," he said, "there is, after an operation, there is the bleeding time, and it's such and such a thing." And he goes on. He turns round to, I think it's Dirk Bogart who was in the film. He said, "You, what's the bleeding time?" He said, 2 o'clock, sir." But no. Anyway, you was going to say about groups and things like that. I think we've got to change our frequency before we can start the groups. Our frequency is wrong. How do we change the frequency? Because in standing in the parks and things like that, the people, I think they're depressed because the government don't have to infiltrate. They can actually send out all the depression all the time. I mean, look at what we got now. Oh, we're going to have nuclear war. Oh, we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to do that. Throughout my life, there's been a threat of nuclear war. It's bullshit. Because I don't believe there's nuclear bombs. But that's another question. But the fact of the matter is, it's all fear porn. And what does fear porn do? It actually makes people frightened of doing anything. No, we've got to be strong, and when the government says you do this, you say, "No, we don't. We're much larger than you. Get stuffed." And that's basically what we've got to do. Tell them to get stuffed. But how? We've got to change our frequency, and how we're going to change our frequency. So, any ideas? Don't all rush at once.
So one of the things is spirituality, of course. And I was going to mention the spiritual revolution that I've seen in Europe. And it's an example I might have mentioned before in the Czech Republic. So I saw people who had been dissidents under communism and people who had been jailed, tortured in some cases by the communists. And they thought that the wall coming down, the end of communism, was going to change everything. And instead they found that it was perhaps business as usual. That instead of being ruled by one foreign country, Russia, they were ruled by a different foreign country, Germany, and that they weren't really any more democratic, and that their society hadn't really changed. Perhaps, the Stasi had or whatever had changed, although, there's still a secret police, whatever people say. Anyway, they started looking at themselves and they said, how did we allow this to happen? And they realized that their country hadn't been free for 450 years. So they'd had 50 years of communism, and before that, they'd had 30 years of fascism, between the wars. And then before that, they'd had about 4 centuries of rule by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and that they hadn't been free for centuries. And what had happened is they'd internalized it, that that their psychology had changed to being servile, that they didn't know how to take their own freedom. They didn't know how free people behave. So there's a quote by Machiavelli, it's in something like Discourses, and he says, very roughly, if you take a wild animal that's by nature very fierce and you keep it in captivity for a long period of time, if it's let free, it's still quite tame. And it's quite easy after that for somebody else to chain it up and lead it into captivity again, because it's lost the habit of freedom. And the people are like that too. If you leave them under the rule of a sort of a prince or a tyrant, they lose the habit of freedom. And if by some chance they find their freedom, they're easily enslaved again.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. We've lost the mental habit of freedom, and it's quite easy to be re-enslaved. So
very true.
What the Czechs found is that they had to free their minds. And so they went through a process of self-examination.
Spot on.
And at the end of this process, you found people who had been through the process, stopped thinking in terms of polarizing politics, in terms of the politics of conflict. Instead of looking at people that they disagreed with, they instead tried to look for people that they could work with. If other people didn't want to work with them, that was fine. But they wanted people who wanted to do something constructive and wanted people who would work with them. And that's how we've got to be too. We've got to try and think of positive things that we want to achieve and people who will help us to do that. If we think in those terms, we might get somewhere. But we've got to stop looking at who are our enemies and what are we against. We've got to try and look at what we want to build.
Yes, I agree that, and I think like attracts like. If you're positive, positive will come along. If you're negative, you'll attract negative. And this is how the government work. They try and promote negativity, where we've got to be positive all the time. Divide and rule is another thing they do. Just keep dividing and ruling all the time. And look what they're doing. All subsections of groups, they try and put you into a category. You're a this, you're a that. And all this nonsense about LGBT, whatever they call it. I don't know what it is, but all that nonsense. I feel terribly sorry for somebody who is genuine, but the large percentage now, it's all minority groups. That's all they seem to look at. Well, it's about time we looked at a majority group. And why is it they're slotting people into groups? They love doing it. That's why they have all these forms. Look at their forms, or ticking this box and that box. You're this. You're in that age group. You're this, that. So bloody what? No, I'm a human being, and that's the way they think. But we got to understand our enemy, and to beat it, as I say, we beat them on our terms, not theirs.
Yes.
I mean, I take your point, Eric. I tend to think that it's the restoration of a lot of the good that has disappeared, that many of us now are more fully aware of what's disappeared, because our forefathers have gone through exactly the same things in different forms, of course, but they have. This is an ongoing thing for thousands of years. How do you overthrow a government or a king or whatever ruler it may be that is becoming, with the passing of time, ever more tyrannical? So we've got a lot to we've got a lot of tools in our toolkit, particularly in these islands, I think. And it may be, I mean, of course, I'm not aware what the Germans may have in their toolkit, but I think we've got quite a lot. And we've kind of been involved in a process of discovering those tools. We're still not fully wielding them yet, though. We've got a thing called the Constitution. We've got certain things that have happened in history, which, of course, people don't know about, understandably, because they're not presented to them. So there's a lack of awareness of these tools that we could use. And we're drawn into, I guess, playing the game as it's laid out today. I think we've got to sort of play all phases of the game. I don't really view politics as being the answer, but if there are certain pushes in the political sphere that help, we should be thankful for them whilst they're here. It does feel more to me like a rearguard action in many ways. But I guess as a simple sort of rule of thumb, I tend to say, what is it that I don't like? What is it that's really getting on my wick? This. Is there anything I can do to remove that? As opposed to having a great vision, because I'm not really bothered about a great vision. Loads of people in history have had them, and yet here we are, still in this sort of position at the moment. I don't think it's about a great vision. I think it's actually about obeying the laws of nature and removing those things that impinge upon them, and getting together in such a way that we can attract more and more people to seeing these things and living by these things in a very simple, chirpy way. It's important that we enjoy the process. I mean, we're all alive right now. Tomorrow never comes. It's always now. And if you find something productive to do today, which is in line with building a better tomorrow, that's really what we should be doing. There are many people are doing things today that are actually creating a worse tomorrow.
Reservation, though. This sort of dissident community has been remarkably short of aims and objectives. And as a result of that, we haven't achieved very much.
Well, that's because they're averse to leadership, you see. It's a natural thing. We're all in rebellion against the whole concept of sort of leadership to some degree. But it does occur. It's an unavoidable aspect of human behaviour.
But it should be natural, not enforced. And
should be, could be, would be, all that kind of stuff. Someone's got to act. And that's, instead of, I'm not here to tell people what to do. I've got to do something. And if I get my ass kicked, then my job's to learn from it. And everybody else should see me getting my ass kicked. So I'm not going to do that. No, you don't want to do that. That's one that we can cross off the list.
But I think, rather than having leaders, we should have principles. We've got to have some aims and objectives, or we're not going to get anywhere.
You've got to aim to something, because it's a bit like in the design world. Now, in architecture, you've got to have in your mind what the finished job is going to be. It doesn't always turn out like that, but you've got a project, and you've got to get that done by a certain time, and you've got to design it in a certain time, and you've got an objective, and everybody's working towards that objective. There's no objective. That is the problem. In a war, there's an objective. There's no objective.
I think there are a few what you would call, say, side objectives that are actually major, like the removal of all these people that are living here that shouldn't be here. There's about 10 million of them is the number that's floating around. I think that's about right. They all need to be repatriated. There's one for you. You'll get called a racist whilst you're involved in that arena, big deal. So what? There's that one. There's the banking system. That's an absolute, an abomination, what it does. The awareness of that's going up all the time.
That is top of the list.
Going up, absolutely, because it feeds the enemy every day. They're getting paid and we don't. So anything that you can do in those areas in terms of developing your linguistic skills, your ability to conduct the presentation of ideas in simple terms that the layman can get hold of, because we're all laymen in regards to certain fields of study. We just are, I mentioned this before, and but we're all involved. And if people don't want to stand together, as in our case, the English, you can kiss it all goodbye anyway. It's a waste of time. The idea of a cosmopolitan world where we're all going to get on, I think that's a joke. I think it's completely mad. If there was any sort of example throughout history where that had ever happened, count me in. But there ain't one, because nature doesn't want it. So we are here to learn the laws of nature and live by them. And getting back to some really raw, simple, basic foundational stuff will stand us in good stead. It won't be easy. It's not meant to be easy. It's only for people that really want to get involved and accept that we might not even win. You've got to. Now, what you're going to do? You go, well, we're going to lose this battle. Yeah, okay. So what's the choice? We either conduct the battle and are overcome there, or we go off and whimper for the rest of our lives. I think it's worth giving it a go, and you've got to accept that we're going to cock it up all over the place. So what? If you're willing to come back tomorrow, that's all. That's the main thing that counts.
So, Paul, going back to the beginning, this is where I started the program tonight. Yeah. We've achieved almost nothing in 10 years. We're no further forward after 10 years. We've got to understand what we've been doing wrong.
Well, can I just play something which I think will sum
please.
things up? Okay, so best bear with me one moment.
Negative people ruin your life. There was a study that was done in 2006 called the Bad Apple Effect, where they took a group of 5 people and randomly added a negative person to some of the groups to see how it would affect the groups while working on tasks. Groups with 1 negative person did 40% worse on all of their tasks, and the quality of their work decreased by 25%. They also found that the groups with a negative person had 50% more conflicts, which led to more disagreements and less collaboration. The crazy part, though, like the real crazy part, is these sessions were only about 30 to 60 minutes. Some of you have had a negative person in your life your entire life. Imagine what they are doing to you mentally. You have to be okay with letting them go, because your mental health is so important that you need to prioritize that over everything else in your life.
And that's it. So that really sums it up. By the way, do you want your slides back on, mate?
What is it, Eric? What do you think mental health is?
Well, just
I never remember that phrase when I was a kid.
No,
it was mental health. But there's so much talk. There's so much language and time spent. Oh, I don't feel like this. I was just told, sort yourself out, lad. That's what my dad said. Our language is so wet. It really is. It's pathetic.
Oh, yeah.
The bottom line is, we're in a fight. The men are absent. You got to start gobbing off like a man. And people
lack of moral fibre. That was it. Lack of moral
a bit
fibre.
of shouting doesn't go amiss. I love a bit of shouting on them. I just sometimes shout in the house for no good reason whatsoever. It's good for you. It's good for your lungs. It's
Nathan,
good, and you engage with something. I've got vast amount. We've all got colossal amounts of energy, but you will never exhibit it if you don't give yourself permission to let go. It's this. Sometimes you've got to be the fart in the spacesuit. You've got to be.
Do you want your slides back, Nathan? I've just
no, wait,
have you nicked them?
Sorry, I didn't quite get. Yes. But,
has Paul gone? Oh well. Anyway, so what?
No, Paul's here. Paul's still here. But do you want me to put your slides back up on the screen? That's it. I didn't quite hear what you said.
Them. No, I think we've got there.
Okay, but as Emvros said, sorry, mate, I haven't been ignoring you. But, I tried to put you on, and I like that turf gag earlier. Very good. Mental health is yet another label. I agree. And people like to have labels on them. Oh, I got mental illness, and all this sort of stuff,
So,
don't you think the old British way or the old ways of addressing things verbally were much stronger. Because what they're doing, they're saying, look, you're responsible for your condition. Sort yourself out. That's what the job of a father is with sons and daughters. It's like, get your act together. Why is your room a mess? Clip, right? Oh, yeah, I better get this done. Oh, it's cruelty to children. It is horse shit, right? There is a line. Everybody knows where it is, and you don't go over it. But there's just a lack of simple, direct language that really helps, because what it's saying is, look, it's your life. If you don't choose to control your own life, guess what? Somebody else will. The real sort of situation is, courtesy of the birth certificate, is the moment you're born, somebody else has already decided what to do with your life from the moment you arrive. This is a relatively recent addition in the control grid. It didn't used to exist in the 1800s. The whole world operated quite well without birth certificates during the height of the British Empire, right? But not now. Apparently, we've got to be tagged, regulated, stamped, approved, registered, licensed for every single thing. And going back to this point about, Nathan, that you were making earlier about domesticated wild animals, that really is the process. Yes. There's that experiment, we've mentioned it many times, the mouse experiment, mouse utopia. We're in it, right? This is where you give mice everything that they want, and they lose the will to live and to assert themselves, and they die. Right. And that's what's happening to us. So, the fact is that you need to seek out on some level discomfort. It's not much of a message, is it? But you do, because in those moments, that's when you grow.
For a second,
that's when you grow.
Well, Sue Britton said,
I understand what you're trying to say, Paul. But at the same time...
I'm not trying to say it, Nathan. I said it. I don't try. Right. I said what I said.
I bring you back to the theme that we started at, which is, how do we make our movement, our community, more effective, have a greater impact? How do we have a greater impact?
Who do you mean, Nathan, when you use the word we?
The dissident.
Who are you addressing? Well, that's an assumption that you think that there is one. You see, I don't think there is. I don't think there is a dissident community. I don't think it's a name, another sort of group nomenclature, a description that everybody goes, I'm in this movement. It might as well be a bowel movement for what it is. It's individuals always throughout history that have stood up and shook a village or a street or a family and said, these are my standards. No, we're not dropping any further. And then
Just stop a second. Right. All right, I'm going to tell you what I think I'm talking about. I'm trying to find a collective term. Now, I'm not sure whether or not this thing that I'm talking about actually exists. Frankly, I think we're so incoherent in what we do, we don't deserve a title. We don't deserve to be called a movement. But the fact is, we're talking about people who are outside the political mainstream, who share a common skepticism of, say, I'm going to call it globalization. I think globalization is probably the thing that we share in common, that we're opposed to it. We're not socialists. Yes. We're not socialists. Well, we might be socialists. I mean, at times I might even call myself a non-Marxist socialist. But the point is, we're not part of the political left, which, let's look at what the political left did. They went hell for leather, supporting the lockdown and vaccination and take away all of our civil liberties. So clearly, we're part of the opposite to that. So here we are. I mean, I've put a few boundaries up, which probably, encircles the area that we're talking about. We're talking about people who don't like globalization, who don't like mainstream politics, who realize that the left are just a bunch of authoritarians who don't really care about helping the poor or people who are disadvantaged in society. They just want to have some sort of moral high ground about their support of justice and their moral legitimacy in enforcing their values on everyone else. So I think that probably defines us. So the thing is, we're people who've got a sort of a roughly coherent set of views. we're in favour of personal liberty, we're in favour of human dignity, we want a less regulated society, and we can't get our act together to do anything because we don't have any aims and objectives. We can't say what we're in favour of. We can say what we're against. All right, what are you in favour of, please, Paul?
I'm in favour of the re-establishment and restoration of the family being at the heart of civilized life.
Same here.
I'm in favour of the restoration of the laws of God as they work, and the laws of men fail, usually, more often than not.
I'm not going to go with you on that. But
I'm in favour of honest money as opposed to dishonest currency. Okay. I'm in favour of an equitable share of the resources of a nation amongst the tribe of that nation, as opposed to those assets being corralled by multinational corporations. A recent addition to the world over the last 200 or 300 years, particularly since the East India Company kicked off in 1600. I'm for the old things because they took place over a long period of time without the interference of mass media, and you can see natural living in the past. This doesn't mean to say, of course, that the peasants were predated upon. They were. Absolutely. But they were more dynamically aware of their situation because life was a raw proposition. It was more instantaneous. If the food didn't come out of the ground during harvest time, you had a problem over the winter, and you knew it. So there was a much more direct connection to the actual whoop and woof of nature in the past. We've become distant from that and there's been many advantages to it. You know, we were bound to do that. We're seeking to improve the quality of our physical lives. But every single area that you look at, which were initially a benefit to us, such as agriculture, all of these things now have been infected by the globalist disease, the Bolsheviks of the world, who are seeking to control it all. And so all the good things that we have created, and we've created many, like off-the-charts stuff, those things have now been weaponized against us. So I can tell you that I'm against that, but I'm for their true use, the actual use that they were intended for. We're in a situation where we cannot even solve our own problems because of bureaucracy. Oh, you can't create an engine that runs on fresh air, but I just have. Yeah, but that would interfere with the profits of the oil industry. Yeah, but they're arseholes. Well, it doesn't matter. We've got all this, and on and on and on it goes. The details are infinite, aren't they?
You could show me that engine, by the way. I mean, no, people might talk about them, but I haven't seen one.
Oh, I've driven one, Nathan. I've been in one. I've been in a car that runs on compressed air. They're being made right now down in Nice by a company called MDA. That's just one company that has done it. But I'm talking about an engine that was designed in 1913 in Los Angeles. I mean, we've probably solved every single problem necessary in terms of energy supply and the honourable growing of crops, you know, the good use of the land. We've learned all this stuff. It's been jettisoned and kicked out because of banks. Banks have fed money into the hands of thieves who've controlled all the markets. So I'm absolutely against. I can tell you what I'm against in that regard, because I'm for the opposite of that. You just spin it round. What is it that you're for? If you're against the banks, you're for honest money. You're not for dishonest currency. It's quite clear. And I think these are the big, clear foundations in most people's lives. The one thing that affects people universally, 24/7, from the minute they're born to the minute they die, is the payment of bills. And if it's not you as a child, it's affecting your parents. And that affects the quality of your upbringing. You know, now we have a situation, don't we, where no one's having any children because, rightly, they're going, it would be irresponsible for me as an Englishman with my wife to do that when we can't afford to buy a house. And what causes that? The private ownership of banks. So the fact that the bank is privately owned, you know, so these are the pragmatic things. These are the things these are not about a sophisticated argument. It's like no food, no radio shows. It's that simple.
Steve has joined us in the studio, and that's one thing. The second thing is we're going to say goodbye to Food for Thought Radio in about a minute, so the music will automatically come on, okay? And the third thing, did you know what penguins and local council tax has got in common?
No, Eric. What do penguins and local council tax have in common?
They
He
can
said,
both stick their
joking.
they can both stick their bills up their arse. But good evening, Steve.
Hey, hi Eric, hi Nathan, hi Paul. How's it all
We're
going?
going to say good.
Hi, Steve.
We're going to say goodbye to Food for Thought Radio in about a minute's time. Any minute now.
A little
It's
bit
gonna-
longer, Eric. Eric, I'll cue you in because we've got a few little audio things. So
Have
in
we?
about half a minute's time, you're going to get this little backing track that should be quiet, and you can talk over it for a minute, and then we're going to get your exit music. And if I've cocked it
Okay.
up, I've cocked it up. But I'm watching.
I think you
here.
cocked it up. Are you sure? Because we didn't get it
Thanks.
for the. Well, no, because when it came on this evening, we were sitting here waiting for it, and the bleeding thing didn't come on. So
Oh,
I
all
mistimed it. Yeah, here we come. Is it? No, it should be here any second.
No, it's
now.
not here yet. No, I'm telling
Yeah.
you, 10. And you can keep on talking. It's not the exit music. It's a little bit of background music.
I'm going to suggest that to have a political movement that is coherent and sustainable, you have to be for something rather than against something. If you're against something, then the government can make concessions, and they appear to, they can co-opt you effectively by giving concessions which are meaningless. You've got to have something that you actually stand for coherently, that stands on its own, rather than being opposed to something.
Yep.
So I'm listening to the background music. I'm sorry, Nathan. It's you can't hear
This is to clue you in. You're not supposed to laugh. I found this. I'm sorry, Nathan. I found this today, Eric. I just thought it's so appropriate for you.
Oh, it's
I'm sorry.
brilliant.
We can get something more sober going forward. Anyway, your exit music is going to start in a couple of seconds. Okay.
Okay, this is Food for Thought Radio. We'll say goodbye. Here it is.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, Food for Thought Radio.
Wake up your mind. Fill up your day. Smart little bites that brighten your way. You're listening to Food for Thought Radio. You're FFTradio.com. Cluck, moo, oink.
That's it. And we're still carrying on Holy Land Radio, Holy Land FM, also on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook. What else are we on? Oh, Odyssey as well, I believe. So we're on quite a few. Oh, and Soapbox Radio as well, Radio Soapbox. So hello, welcome, Steve. So we've got Nathan, Steve, and Paul in the studio. And welcome, gentlemen. And we can carry on now on talking about what objective have we got? How are we going to go forward?
Well,
So
this is a great
what's our
point.
goal?
Well, this is a great point, and this is why I thought I'd take the opportunity and take up your offer of the invite for coming on the
You're always
event. So
welcome.
thanks for having me on,
Oh, it's a
and
pleasure.
hello to the other gentlemen who are here.
Hi, Steve.
I mean, I've been listening intently to the conversation going on, and it's been really interesting indeed. But I thought I'd just chip in with a few things because, some of the points that have been brought up and addressed, some of the questions that are being asked, and some of the problems that are still extant within, let's just say, the truth and freedom community, have all been answered. All of these points have been answered since the dawn. If you go back far enough, they've been answered since the dawn of man, since the inception of the universe. And of course, ultimately, what this alludes to is something called natural law, which, as you probably already know, certainly yourself, Eric and Paul, I'm not sure if you understand, if we've not spoken about it before, Nathan, on the things that I talk about on my Telegram channel and on my presentation series is something called natural law. Again, this is something that's inherent to the conditions of the universe. So therefore, this thing is already written as a solution in nature. It's provided by nature, by the creator. All we have to do is align ourselves to the understanding of it and assimilate it into our lives. And one of the reasons for this is because when we go against nature, as we know through anything, pick anything natural in the environment, such as food products, if we choose to eat genetically modified crops and artificial sweeteners in other E numbers in our food items, our health declines. So it goes without saying, if we then try to harmonize ourselves with artificial man-made laws, our freedom declines. So if we will improve upon freedom, which is what I'd imagine most people in the freedom movement actually want, well, there is actually a condition that is enabled, or that has to be enabled in order to generate freedom. It's not something that can be given or granted by a political movement. In fact, there's no political stance that can generate freedom, because politics is designed to extort and take away freedom. So there's no political measure. There's only a measure that means people run in coherence with nature and nature's laws.
Excellent.
I mean, if you like, I can elaborate on this, because it is something that is not massively discussed by the truth movement. And that, I mean, the reason I say this is because the truth movement, well, let's say the freedom movement first and foremost, it's the same thing ultimately, we know that. If the freedom movement want freedom, why aren't they adhering to the law of freedom? So there is a law already established in nature. It's called the law of freedom. This is scientifically proven. It's got a mathematical equation to help people understand it, but it comes also with a very simple phrase. The phraseology of the law of freedom states that when morality improves, freedom improves. But when morality declines, freedom declines. This is a very, very simple thing. I mean, a child can understand that concept. That means if we want freedom, morality has to be established in community, in societies. Right? Most people watching this will probably think, and most people in the truth and freedom movement will probably say, well, I'm already a moral person. How come this isn't working? Well, the reason why the law of freedom does not apply is because most people think they're moral, and they think that members of the community are moral. But what they don't realize that if we participate, advocate for, fund, and enable any form of external authority under man's legislation, i.e. government, i.e. politics, i.e. all the local councils, the police and the military, when we enable and advocate for all of these organizations, we decline in morality, because all of these enablers of immorality transgress natural law through the various transgressions. Most people don't understand that, so therefore we are not yet in a position to be educated, or we're not educated enough on the conditions of, or the boundary conditions, I should say, on natural law. Therefore, we're not going to get freedom until our moral education improves.
Spot on. I agree. 100%
Yep.
agree with you.
That's
That's
true.
why you see, this is the thing. The thing what we got with democracy, I think it's what do you get? You're going to get a demonic psychopath in power. And that's what we've got around the world, demonic psychopaths in power. It leads to that because it's designed by them for them. Sadly, that is the truth. Because you look at the amount of wars, governments have killed more of their own people than all the wars put together. They're lethal, absolutely lethal. This is why it needs kind of, shall we say, on a local level, so that things can't, you know, if the country's going to go to war, the people have got to vote on it. And I like what they did in America, but they didn't take it through. But loads of people wanted it. That people who, if there's going to be a war, people vote on it, and those that vote yes will be recruited the very next day.
If I may chip in with one other thing, there's something else that I think is essential for us to get our heads around. I mean, you've mentioned quite nicely what government do. Well, government, what are they best at? The government are best at denying people of their God-given freedoms. So freedoms aren't granted by the government, they're granted by nature, they're granted by creation. Government rein those in, and over time what they do is they rein all of those freedoms in. And as we can see now, we establish tyranny, which is what society is best described at in our current condition. One other thing, and again, for those who don't know or aren't aware, I used to be a soldier at a high level. So soldiering and warfare is my expertise, my specialist subject. So this is one thing we need to realize. We might have lots of great intentions. The truth movement, loads of people commentate and loads of people have got ideas and points. One thing they don't have is battle experience, and they don't have warfare experience. So if they don't have warfare experience, how can we navigate in World War III? And when I say World War III, I'm not talking about what's going on in Iran. I'm going on by what was established from 1947 at the end of World War II and onwards. And one significant push came in the year 2001. The other significant push came in the year 2020 with the medical thing that happened. That was just a major offensive, which was, yeah, exactly right. That was a major offensive that was perpetrated by, let's just say, government organizations upon the civilian population. And one thing we've got to remember in war, and bearing in mind I've done warfare for the best part of 30 years, warfare is not aimed at an enemy combatants. Warfare is aimed at the general public. It's in order to instigate significant political change or certain financial caveats. We all know that. Anybody who doesn't know that, to me, at this point in time, is a complete imbecile. And I will say practically the entire establishment of the British police and military are complete imbeciles. They need significant amounts of head trauma in order to get these people out of their stupidity. But that leads me on to the principles of war, which I think, and I'm not going to go through all of them because there's 10, but one thing we really firmly need to realize is the first principle of war, which is selection and maintenance of the aim. If we don't have an aim, then we can't fight and we can't combat any offensive action that is done to us. That's why we are still at loggerheads. That's why we're still trying to invent solutions and reinvent the wheel. Now I'm going to say what the selection and maintenance of the aim should be, and we've been saying it for 6 years. The truth and freedom movement, the truth and freedom movement, the truth and freedom movement. Well, what does the truth and freedom movement want? They want freedom, and how do they get it? By understanding truth. So the aim needs to be freedom, the objectives need to be truth. Truth runs in part with principle. What is a principle? Natural law. Natural law generates freedom. There's your truth. All you need is the principles to apply it, which means aligning your behavior towards the conditions that are necessary in order to generate it. That's it. That's the truth and freedom movement sorted out. World peace, harmony, freedom, goodwill to all mankind forever and ever. Amen.
Spot on. And what do you say? A change in frequency, the way we look at things. Like, for example, what it gets me is, we're going on a protest march. It's more like slaves begging the master to be a little bit more easier on the whip. That's all it is. It should be, we're not going on a protest march. We are saying we want this, and or just ignore the government. Just saying, well, we want this, and we're going to do this because we are the people.
The second principle of war is maintenance of morale. So again, when I talk about the principles of war, I haven't just pulled these out of a hat. This is how the army establishes itself. This is how the army fight. Now, I completely disagree with the army. I want it disbanded. I think they're all a bunch of knuckle-dragging imbeciles, lunatics of the highest order. And how do I know that? Well, I was one of the main ones. I was the biggest order-following numpty on the face of the planet until I had a moral education. Therefore, I've been in that environment. I've worn the T-shirt and I know what they stand for. But I also know the good things that they stand for, which is how to kill other people and how to fight battles. So if we're in war at the moment and we're the victims in this war, well, we need to establish war fighting principles. Again, maintenance of morale is the second principle of war. So if you want to raise your frequencies and go on all of these empowerment exercises, and that's ultimately a very good thing. I wouldn't disagree with that whatsoever.
I think also what we're, again, is objective. Nobody has got a clear objective in these peace movements, I found, of what we actually want. And that's the thing. There's no objective. And I find that quite disturbing. It's just depression all the time. But yeah, but how are we going to get from point A to point B?
So again, just to, I mean,
no roadmap.
Again, just to reiterate what I made with my first point, the objective, or the aim rather. So let's talk about aims and objectives as you would if anyone's give a presentation before. It usually starts off with an aim. What's the overarching aim of the freedom movement? Well, we want to be more free. We want less tyranny. We want less violence. We want less nonsense. We want less PDF files. We want less cannibals we need less maniacs in all of these figureheads of government. Well, how do we establish freedom? Well, the way to establish freedom, as I've just said, is through understanding a scientifically accurate and provable formula to establish freedom, known as the law of freedom, which is a truth and a principle. If we follow truth and principle, then we generate freedom. That, as I've just said earlier as well, the way or the objective of generating this aim of freedom is to align our behavior with the law of freedom, which states freedom increases when morality increases. Therefore, if we want freedom, we need to establish more morality in society. And the way to do that is to have less authority in society, because freedom and morality can never be generated by something that takes it away, which is government and authority. Authority comes from the creator of the universe. And if people are quite familiar or happy with the word God, we'll use the word God. So freedom is a condition granted by God on the adherence of our behaviors to moral principles. We can't do that when we establish government as our lords and masters. That's why the Bible calls it the beast system. I'm not a Bible basher, by the way. In fact, I'll speak negatively about most, if not all, religions, because religion is a means of mind control that stops people understanding the high value level of truth and principle required to generate freedom. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I can go a lot deeper than that, but in fact, what I will do is I'll recommend my own book, which I co-authored with a very excellent author called Nathan Lucius, who wrote Fake Awake. There's 430 odd pages in there, which explain quite succinctly exactly what I've said in fine detail, where anybody can understand that in its most simplistic forms. But thanks for the plug there, Eric. I mean, I recommend that to the entire freedom movement. Why? Because I want the freedom movement to become free. So I am delivering my battle-winning strategy to the freedom movement. And if they don't want it, well, that's great. Enjoy tyranny. Enjoy the rest of World War III. Or if you do want it, happy days. Let's go be free together.
Very good. Any comments on that, gentlemen? And Nathan, Paul, what's your...
Well, just a sort of side comment, really, when, Steve, when you just... It's interesting in Scripture, because I don't think anything's really changed. The tribes of the Old Testament initially had judges over them, and that didn't turn out too good. The idea was that they were to obviously judge the law and your behavior in the face of the law, and that kind of got out of hand because certain individuals, there's a fly in the ointment here, and it's been in the ointment for a long time, it would seem. Maybe there was a period in human history prior to this current age, whenever we might think that this has begun, where things were more peaceable and productive, and there was a much higher level of moral and ethical behavior in line with the laws of nature and the laws of God. But they started off with judges, and surrounding tribes got kings, so they decided that they wanted a king. Whether you actually go along with this or not is, whether you think it's just a fictitious account, it is down to the individual, I guess, whether you actually believe that these things really happened. I think most of them did, because it's really an account of human group behavior. And once they got kings, it kind of was okay for a bit, and then there was a lot of war involved again. So it seems that the real enemy is ourselves, of course, if we get super enlightened about it. In other words, our behavioral patterns as individuals. And I have to say that mine are I work on the basis of trying to make myself behave better tomorrow than I did yesterday, and try and do that in the here and now. That's about it. There are things that I've done in the past which were silly and stupid, and everybody's done that. What's the thing? We're all sinners in the eyes of God. Well, we are, in the true sense of what a sin is, which comes from a Greek term, archery, which means to miss the target. It's in archery. It's when you sin. In other words, you don't get the point. You actually come up short. You fail in some way in light of the law in comparison to it. And so it's as if this condition down here in this realm, it seems to me has always been like this. It's taken different forms, but it's always been like this. So it's down to individuals, I think, like birds of a feather. I want to think of us all as being the same, but we're not. Because we're not. I've got no evidence to suggest it. And yet it's a myth that's kind of encouraging. It sort of warms the heart. You think, well, we can all do this together. But it's like I was saying earlier, who do I mean when I use the word we? It varies. It varies throughout your life about who you're actually sort of harmonizing well with, who you're empathizing well with. That changes as you change throughout life. So the thing is that we err. And it's I guess to some degree, much of this evil comes in through the supposed protections that government are going to give you against the others that are going to err and create crimes, all this kind of stuff. It begins there. We need some law and order, we all say. And, there is some good arguments for it if you're surrounded by packs of lunatics who are going to murder you and do stuff. I mean, I wasn't alive 3,000-4,000 years ago, but it seems pretty hellish at times. A lot of violence going on back then. It's still going on now to this day. So it's to do with kind of the caliber of human beings. We're seeking to just improve,
Do you mind if I come in on that, Paul?
Certainly.
No, of course not, Steve.
You've mentioned some great things, and again, I'm coming in before I forget them all, because you've mentioned about people who would do harm to others, and I'm guessing by that you mean like criminal gangs or murderers or evil people. So I mean, if that is or isn't the case, what I am going to say is provably. So this isn't just my speculation. This is based upon proof. So again, the truth movement wants truth. Well, here's truth number one. The biggest murderers, the biggest gang of murderers on the face of planet Earth since the beginning of time are the government. Now, Eric mentioned before the figure, I'm not sure what you mentioned, but the figure that is provably demonstrated to have become, as a result of the actions of government upon people, where the people have been killed through acts of murder, is 262 million people in the last 100 years. Now, I'm not just talking about the British government or the American government. I'm talking about worldwide governments. I mean, all of these figures are provable. These are all, anyone could look these up. You can get them all in fine details as to where, when, by whom, and how. So it's like starvation is one. I mean, we'll probably find that when history readjusts the history books, we'll find that poisonous thingies are going to be probably the largest death toll
I
on
agree
that
with you
list.
there. I agree with you there, mate.
But that might take some time. The reason I'm mentioning that is because if we're concerned that we need government protection to protect us from gangs of thugs, the government are the biggest murderers of the planet. So the reason I'm mentioning this is when I talk about morality, I'm not talking about, well, internal vices such as I try to be a good person and I could do better for myself. I'm not talking about the 7 deadly sins. These are internal vices. Yeah, we could all change our behaviors and do better internally. I'm talking about external transgressions of natural law. So natural law, first and foremost, as a sort of caveat, I think it's important to actually understand what that is. Natural law is the governing dynamics of the universe that set the conditions we experience, which are formulated upon the consequences from our collective behaviors. And as I said earlier, there is a law of freedom that states when morality inclines, freedom increases. When morality declines, freedom declines. That means if we allow a substance or an organization called government to be our lords and masters, we as a collective, the human race as a collective, enters into a unholy bargain with immorality, because governments, the biggest murdering gang on the face of the planet, transgress all 7 laws or all 7 external transgressions of natural law. And I'll just list them because I think it's important at this point so people don't think I'm just a blabbermouth talking out of his arse. 7 transgressions of natural law. Number 1, murder. 2, assault. 3, theft. 4, rape. 5, trespass. 6, coercion. And 7, deception. Government, and this is the thing, by the way, you might have guessed I'm a complete anarchist. Anarchy means no masters, because if you've got no masters, you've got no slaves. Incidentally, I'm going to put that in brackets. Anarchy does not mean no rules, because natural law is the rule. It means don't transgress those 7 external transgressions upon other people: murder, theft, rape, violence, assault, trespass, coercion, deception. Biggest criminal gang on the face of the earth is the illusion that we have called authority, i.e. government. That's how we change our morality for the better, by becoming anarchists.
Well, Alice Gorgeous says there was less crime when blokes in villages sorted out bad men. Bring back self-governments. Yes. And
yeah. So it's a point that we didn't voluntarily agree to all of this. It was forced upon us.
Spross
You
on.
know, we didn't voluntarily agree to have this government. You know, because William the Conqueror invaded and he imposed it upon us. And you know, there's been a superstructure that's imposed it ever since. You know, we
Normans.
might have this of having elections, but we can't really vote to get rid of it.
I agree.
No, it's here. This is the situation that we're in. I think that,
That's right.
I mean, the William the Conqueror thing, Nathan, as well, is, you know, we have this understandable idea about the Normans that they were a rather aggressive, divisive, controlling and vicious sort of crew. And there's a lot of evidence, if historical records are accurate, to suggest quite strongly that that's the case. What many people don't know is, why were they like that? Why were they that way? There weren't many other tribes around in Europe that were so prone or ready to pick up the sword to actually get what they wanted. They were driven by things. One of the things that happened to them, because this is like a big domino effect going all the way back into scripture, and probably this is a condition that's been with us for a long time. But when Charlemagne was kicking shit out of people in France, he called all the Norman leadership, because he was having a bit of a problem with them, to a meeting, and he asked them to not bring any weapons. So that's what they did, 5,000 of them. These were the top guys and gals from the Norman tribe. the people that had the brains and the muscles and whatever, the most competent of their people. And they went along to this meeting, and Charlemagne slaughtered all of them. They took no weapons because they were asked to go weaponless, so they showed good faith. They behaved in a moral and ethical way, and they got completely slaughtered. And after that, the remnant said, so that's how it's played, is it? And they changed internally. It was like a psychological bomb went off inside them, and a spiritual bomb, and they became the people that they became. They were the fiercest warriors in the Crusades. They were known for this. They were Scandinavians. That's why they were known as Norman. I'm not, just explaining all these events in history is not going to necessarily get to the answer, but we're at the current point in a long trail of this type of behavior that has taken place, not just with European people. Every single race and culture across the earth has behaved like this for a long time, it would seem. And when they didn't behave like that, we don't have records that seem to go back that far. So the thing is that it's like this down here. I'm not arguing for it being like this. I'm not particularly a fan. And I think if you're in the firing line of 10,000 arrows or swords are coming to take your head off, you're going to take whatever actions you can under that. Of course, you could say, rightly, it's a bit too late for that now, isn't it? We should have thought about this before. But people have got a certain limit of resources, intellectually and physically, land that they have available. It's just the repetition of this type of event has taken place, as far as we can see, all the bloody time, literally the bloody time. And, so what's that old adage? In times of peace, prepare for war, and in times of war, prepare for peace. You think, I remember as a kid thinking, does it have to be like this? I mean, it's just daft. It is, but me just saying that doesn't stop it.
Well,
so it's tricky. It's tricky. It was like this when we got here. What can we do? I don't think, I don't go around thinking, right, well, if we just sort a few things out, we'll come up with the ultimate solution. We won't. I don't think we will. I don't think we're any better than any previous generation at all in terms of our moral compasses or anything like that. We've got an awful lot more gear, and the presence of technology has eased the burden for huge numbers of people who lived lives in comparison of tremendous drudge. I mean, if we go back 400 years, none of us have been alive. We'd have all been dead by the time we were 35 or 40. Maybe we'd have been happier. Maybe we'd have a shorter blast of it. I don't know. I don't know what they talked about back then. But I'm just saying there's nothing new under the sun with this. Are there periods of history that we can look at where people have behaved in a particular way that has run in line pretty much with what Steve said? There are always moral and ethical people. And it seems that they are in the minority all the time. And if you are a moral and ethical person,
equation can we change? Sorry to cut in.
I don't know. I don't know, Steve. What do you think? Which part of the equation can we change?
Well, the reason I mentioned it is because I fully take on board what you're saying about all of this stuff happened in the past. Yeah, I totally accept that. And is there any examples in the past? Frankly, I don't know.
The Amish
recorded history.
The Amish,
perhaps,
they don't have leadership as such, but I believe, I learned this from Patrick, I don't know too much about them, but I believe the Amish, it's the elders that make decisions. And that's really what it should be. The elders that you respect make decisions because they've got the wisdom. And that's how tribes run.
The point I was trying to raise is we can't change the past. We can't even change the future. We can affect the future, but we can only affect the future in the present. I mean, we can affect the future in the present by establishing what is the third principle of the principles of war, which is offensive action. And when I say offensive action, I mean, you've mentioned quite a few there, Paul, with things that have gone on in history. Well, offensive doesn't just mean we're going to need to pick up weapons and start running amok and blazing down the people that we feel are opposing us. It means that we take offensive in terms of bold decisions. It doesn't mean that we just sit on our laurels and just hope and pray for a miracle and poke the bear just like this, like woosers, like, oh, poke the bear. No, it's offensive action. It means, and excuse me, ladies, grow a fucking pair of balls. And that's what society needs to do. And the only way that's going to happen is when the men of this planet actually start standing up for truth and principle by showing, I don't mean figuratively, literally, I mean figuratively, show these balls to other people and show that they've got balls and determination.
Yes.
And I'll give an example of that. And again, I'm not trying to big myself up here, but I used to be a combat soldier, an infantry soldier. I served notice on the MOD as an individual. 80,000 people were opposed to my decisions, and I stood up, and again, figuratively speaking, I showed my balls to the MOD when I served notice on them, and I served legal notice on the Defence Select Committee and various other establishments, such as almost the entire police force in the northeast of England and beyond. More people need to be taking decisive action. This is what's known as offensive action. And if we're taking offensive action, we are passive. And if we're passive, we will become combat ineffective and eventually we'll trip up and we will get defeated. No battle has ever in the history of mankind been won by being a defeatist, being passive and waiting for something to happen. You need to make the thing happen to affect the future. Sorry if I'm starting to rant a little bit. I'm
Not
going
at
off
all.
on a tangent.
No, more ranting, please. Ranting's good. I think, Steve.
It's good. You're speaking from the heart. That's what I like.
I know
to
you
hear.
were
It's
talking
good.
about. I know you were talking about history there, Steve. But you see, I think we are at the effect of things in the past. All the time. You see, all there is now, and every single thing other than now is history, including what we were talking about 30 seconds ago. And it's all basically compressed into one big sort of behavioural field. This is the way I tend to look at it. You know, we were just talking about the Normans, right? So it took place nearly 1,000 years ago. But when we're talking about those things, we manifest them and bring them to life. And we've all got our own views and little feelings and thoughts and images from what you've seen flash up instantly like an internal movie to colour each one of our own views of history. And we are at the effect of it. They're like things that have gone into the bones. You know, it's a bit like your environment. We know that if people live in decent housing that's clean, they behave better. This is really basic stuff, but it do. And we look at the housing that's been built here. What we've got, we have a type of warfare that's been waged on us that's taken us quite a while to see. Because we've been kept like birds in a gilded cage in comparison to previous generations. And your mum and dad possibly said that to you. Oh, you don't know how lucky you are, my dad. And you know what? He's right. He said, you know, if you'd have been alive 100 years ago, you'd have been dead, lad. You'd have been down pit or something. Like, would I? Yeah. You wouldn't have been poncing about in a suit and stuff like that. So I'm thankful for the fact that I've reached a certain age and, you know, on a personal level, I've had lots of really golden moments in my life and I've had tragedies and also just like everybody gets. That's what happens. It seems to come with the territory, but we are at the effect of these decisions. You know, democracy's got a lot to answer for. It's the weaponization of control. Oh, you're all included now. Another great deception. Yeah, your vote really counts, does it really? All these sorts of things. And we're
bugger all.
Yeah, absolutely. We're unpicking all this crap. And it's a never-ending, it seems to me, challenging process. And in a way, that's a good thing. Because there's always something to get out of bed for to motivate you. I think, I understand exactly what you're talking about having a combat mentality. I've viewed it like that, personally, ever since I found out how banks operated 35 years ago. Changed my life completely, internally. I look the same on the outside, and I've had some good times since. But I went, That's the bit that got me. With other people, it's the medical, it's the pharmaceuticals. With others, it's the lack of quality in food. We've got eyes to see, and I would suggest probably what we're lacking on is just action. And honestly, seriously, at this stage, I think any action, a bit like when Nathan was talking about at meetings, getting people to stand up, something about physically just putting a bit more in and going, I'm a gal that can put more in and connect up with the guy over the road. Because I remember there's something that a bloke I know, also an ex-military guy, said to me years ago about the condition that we're in. He's fully aware of everything that's going on. He said, the number one enemy you've got is your neighbour. And it's right. I mean, it's the condition in your neighbour's head. It's not all neighbours. I'm not trying to pick and say, get cross with your neighbours. But when push comes to shove, if your neighbour works for the coppers and does that stuff and he needs his pay packet, he's going to beat your head in with a stovepipe at that meeting. they're going to do that. Why are they going to do that? Because are we going to be able to reach them fast enough? I'm just looking at the practical challenges as they are right now. Are we going to be able to reach those people quick enough to get them to go, you know what, I shouldn't be doing this? In a way, Steve, you're an exception. I mean, literally, you know, in the true definition of the word, you're not like most of the other people that enrolled in the military, as far as I'm aware, right? So, and you could say this is an exception that proves the rule, and it does. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I guess the bit I'm chomping at the bit at, maybe this spreads around, is what would be the best action, given my resources, that I could do tomorrow, immediately? What are these things? And I seek, personally, to do those things whenever I've got an opportunity to do it. And I also accept that in many ways they're a drop in the bucket, and they make, in the big scheme of things, they make no bloody difference. But they make a difference to me. And they make a difference, I think, to the people that I smile at or engage with or do these things. And you go, well, this is all small, prissy little stuff. But it's the very glue of life that I personally have thrived on whenever I've been in a happy situation. And if I look at all the things when I've been happy, for me, it's always been in a family, either as a child in a family or as a parent of one. These have been the best times of my life, off the charts, happiness. And there's always shit to worry about. I mean, if you combing through all the fear porn on your phone, cut it down a bit. I can't tell people to not do it, but we've hit a point, I think, in this truth event, whatever you want to call it, where we've gone past our sell-by date. And I think this conversation is indicative of it, and it's a good symptom of it, that we're saying, okay, we've had a long time to look at the lie of the land, and it's shit. Yeah, every single thing that we kind of depended upon in a way, unconsciously, whilst we were growing up, it turns out all of those things, all of them have been weaponized against us. They're undermining the quality of our life, and they're attacking us in a different way. They're literally hypnotizing us to death. That's what's taking place. So, you know, the idea of getting people, wake up and do stuff, they go, I don't even see the problem. I don't even see what you're talking about. That kind of stuff, you know, it's tricky.
So we're just about running out of time. Can I just interject?
I'm beginning to wilt a little bit, so I think we need to
you're wilting. Oh, it's just getting going again, Eric, just when you were cutting back to 2 hours.
I know. I was up at 5 this morning, so I'm getting a bit. Yeah.
Have a lie-in tomorrow.
Yes.
So we've got the problem that we've got to try and build, in effect, a kind of moral army with shared objectives that's coherent, that it works together. And we've got to do this voluntarily. And because, you know, we don't want to coerce other people into it. How are we going to get other people who aren't ready, who haven't had this sort of moral awakening yet, that haven't got the clarity that maybe we do? How do we get them on our side and up to speed and doing what's needed to do?
We become winners.
That brings me on to the applicable principle of war, which is concentration of force. Concentration of force. I mean, we've talked about offensive action, which is having the robustness to do something proactive to affect the future. We also we've talked about maintenance of morale, and we've talked about selection and maintenance of the aim. So my point on that, on how to achieve the concentration of effort, is and in fact, there's two things I talk about exclusively, one of which is precision education. The second is a battle-winning mindset. So the education, this is essentially centered upon natural law. So it's pointless me humming and hawing about, well, the answer is natural law if people don't understand it. And, you know, I'm not suggesting people who are watching this show don't understand that. But again, because government and the education system don't teach this, they don't teach it to nobody. It's what would be classed as an occult science. The word occult means hidden. It is one of the greatest, if not the greatest secret in all the secret societies. That's how precious it is. That's how impactful it is, because it is the biggest secret in secret societies. So precision education. One way to do this, I mean, I've already plugged, thanks to courtesy of Eric, plugged Nathan Lucius's book, which I co-authored, called Fake Awake. One thing I would definitely recommend to anybody, if anybody wants to take one positive step this evening or tomorrow when they've got 8 hours on their hands, is to watch a presentation by Mr. Mark Passio from whatonearthishappening.com, who talks exclusively about natural law, and he has a presentation package 8 hours long called the Natural Law Seminar. That should be probably the most, if anybody wants to do one positive thing in their life, watch that. The second positive thing they can do is watch it again, because I can guarantee it will take several times for most people to understand that and absorb the necessary information from it. The second thing I generally encourage is to read a book called The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. It's about 97 pages long, and seriously, I'm not the world's fastest reader, but I could read it in an afternoon. And it's very straightforward and simple, and I can guarantee anybody reading that will immediately have an aha moment where they think, how did I not understand? How has this been from me? And how have I not understood such very straightforward truths and principles? So the second thing is a battle winning mentality. And again, if we want to win a war, again, I've talked about growing a pair of balls, ladies included. In fact, to be honest, some of the ladies in the Truth and Freedom community, much respect, because most ladies, I think, absolutely destroy the men in terms of the positive mental attitude, the determination and the robustness. But that's essentially what we all need to develop, because we're going up against a bunch of career criminals called the government, and they employ order-following, absolute depraved imbeciles called the police. And if the police don't get their satisfaction clubbing old grannies over their heads with their nightsticks, well, they employ even bigger imbeciles, such as my workmates, who carry things that go bang, bang, bang. So we need to start really developing some understanding and some bottle. And then what we need to do as well is put it into practice. Now, one thing, ultimately, we need to stop funding the beast system. I stopped funding them years ago. I face backlash from it, but when we've got concentration of effort, which is what we need to do, more people, strength in numbers, their ability to wage effects upon us is limited and reduced. Sorry, I've talked a while there. I'll let somebody else speak.
That's all right. But I was going to actually wind the show down a little bit because, as I say, I'm a bit cream-crackered.
That's not allowed, Eric. Thanks for that, Steve. By the way, just to let you know, the link to that Passio 8-hour thing, I've put it in both the Rumble and the YouTube chats for anybody that wants to get stuck into that. I saw a lot of his stuff about 8 or 10 years ago. He's a very interesting guy because he's an ex-Satanist, isn't he? I think something like that.
That's right.
Yep. No, but he's very good. He does some brilliant stuff. So I'll probably get. I've got 8 hours to kill tomorrow morning, Eric. You can get up at 4 in the morning. Watch that. You'll be free by lunchtime.
That's a good idea. Yes. Why not?
Yeah. Stop mucking about. Get on with it. So yeah. No, that'd be great. That's good.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the show. It's much appreciated. It's worked bloody well tonight, isn't it? It really was. Thanks, Nathan, for your speech at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan.
That was very, very enlightening.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Steve, for coming on, and thank you, Paul, for coming on, and everybody in chat. It's much appreciated. Now, Paul, you have something to plug for 8 o'clock this Thursday on Rumble.
Yeah, we'll be going live 8 o'clock on Thursday through to 11 o'clock. Steve, I might be in touch with you. I think I'd like to carry this conversation on in part, possibly on Thursday if you're free, but don't answer me now on air. It'd be good because I think there's tons of questions to keep asked in the right spirit, of course, obviously. But yeah, no, it's... I've really enjoyed tonight, Eric. It's been fantastic. And Nathan, your opening stuff was really good. It throws up more questions than answers, but I often think that that's a good thing, to be quite honest. So, much food for thought. pun intended.
It is, and as I say, it is interesting. We live in interesting times, and I was what you were saying, Steve. I mean, I was looking at Trump the other day, talking about the sinking of a ship. Over 87 lives were lost, and he is talking like a schoolboy, just like a schoolboy. Oh, it was embarrassing. That is government.
It says in Scripture that you will be ruled over by women and children when you lose sight of the law.
It's true.
Anybody? Just have a look.
It's very true. It's very, very true.
I mean, the people in government actually have an infantile view of the world, and it's very, very dangerous. Very. Because they think that they've been graced with great nobility of spirit and they know best, and we're all complete morons. And it's, of course, the complete opposite. But you can't convince it, you know. I don't see it being possible in my lifetime to have conversations with those sorts of individuals that will make any difference at all. So it's not a good use of time. It's better, I think, anyway, to spend it with, like I said, people on a similar wavelength and to seek to build up balls of energy and action as well. There's great power in action. Isn't that an old adage? There is. When you do stuff, something changes, and it's about doing. And we probably all spend a bit too much time in front of the screen. I'm guilty on that account, although I think I do it for right reasons. But of course, I'm sure everybody thinks that as well. But yeah.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. And so it's 8 o'clock this Thursday, Paul English Live on, I believe, Rumble and also YouTube, isn't it? And also, of course, Food for Thought Radio and Holy Land Radio, Holy Land FM, and Soapbox as well. Radio. So
yeah, Mark the Bowler Hat should be on tomorrow night on Food for Thought at 7 o'clock. Shelley Tasker's on at 7 o'clock on Wednesday. On Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock on Food for Thought Radio. How about this? A live show for 2 hours on Wednesday mornings with Callie, who I forgot the name of her YouTube channel, but she just started last week. There are more people coming on board. Good. So there's all sorts. Yep.
And what about
if anybody out there thinks,
Farmer?
Yeah, the FM Farm. I'm doing I'm doing a show with him next Monday on crypto on BSV, which I am of the view currently, until I learn something else, definitely offers a solution to the lack of money that we have. You know, our enforced use of currency. These things are we've been subtly undermined in so many ways and bamboozled, understandably so. But we're de-bamboozling ourselves, aren't we? And that's a good process.
No, de-bamboozling. That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. And please subscribe, shove your thumbs up as well. On the comment thing. And whatever happens, have a bloody good laugh. And good night.